it gives confidence for people who don't understand this technology to utilize your products more. Right? So I love AI, I love quantum, but if you talk about timing, I think blockchain, even though it started early, is finally here.
And any of our speaker planning to investing in a certain industry, maybe we could take this into account. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Control Shifter, a podcast by Smart Dev and Reshape AI featuring voices that take control and drive the ship. Our guest today isn't just a tech guy or a finance guy, he's lived through both. Welcome Wave, head of Southeast Asia at Quanium. He started out auditing at traditional banks, moved to digital asset at PwC for nearly a decade, and now he's working on something very exciting, quantum secure infrastructure. What makes him rare is he's this translator between the old world and what's next in finance. So Wade, thank you for joining us today. Any thought you would like to share with the audience before we jump right in?
Hey Maddie, hey everyone on the podcast. Nice to meet you guys. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Smart Dev, for putting this together and Maddie for reaching out. No, I think this is a very exciting time in history where all of us here present get to enjoy, right, the tech disruption in a way that's never seen before. So it's so exciting that so many people and so much energy is getting into the various technology space, and that's why we get to meet as well. So I'm really happy to be here and have a good conversation.
I'm ready. Let's jump right in. You have a career path across from legacy finance to frontier innovation. So let's start from the beginning. You started in banking and classic audit, and not from the flashiest corner of fintech. And now look where you are. So how did you first get pulled toward fintech, digital assets, and the role you are in now?
I've always been in finance, right? It's not old, it's not new. Finance is just constantly changing and evolving throughout history. And now we're at the frontier of technology disruption for finance, and that's how they call it fintech, techfin. But basically, finance is constantly evolving when there are new opportunities and new technology. And I happen to be so fortunate to be riding the waves, right? So I think obviously I coined the old and the new, right? But honestly, it's a moving journey for both the people within the banks and outside as well, which is the fintech and the tech firms, right? So for me, I was a guy who never really sits still. I used to joke if I was born 100 years ago, I would be inventing aeroplanes, right? Like I just like to do really cool and meaningful stuff, right? So when I first started young, I wanted to kind of work in a job that involves a bank because I thought that's where all the money is, that's where all the opportunities are, right? So I just dive into something that was related to the banks. And fairly quickly, right, I think if I recall those days, we kind of just walked out of a dot-com boom and then subsequent right? And tech started to take off in shapes and form. Then Google came, and one by one, each technology started taking off. So there was this light bulb moment where I was sitting and just auditing the banks and wondering, can I do more? Should I be part of this exciting thing that's going to come, right? I recall it was about 2015, maybe, right? Just sitting in the bank, I was just thinking, maybe I should do fintech. It's just a random moment, and it was very early days. We're talking about very very early days when tech just started converging with finance. So that's just how it all started. A light bulb moment. I thought it's good to plant my feet into the unknown, right, and just learn more about tech from scratch in those moments and see how it can converge with finance. So one thing led to another, and various technologies came and go. Some stayed, and eventually I landed in the digital assets role, which is what many known as crypto and blockchain. And we kind of bring that all together. So that was a very interesting journey. It was just a curious and hungry guy trying to figure out the coolest thing in town, and I landed in that role.
That's a very cool journey, and you're definitely like driving the wave. So from your seat today, what do you see more clearly about financial system than you did 10 years ago?
I was fortunate, right? As I scaled the corporate ladder, worked through my engagements and opportunities. As you work up the ranks, you get to interact with people who are in more and more senior positions, people who can make decisions for the institutions, right? And that's where, in those interactions, it shapes your view on what matters to them. But as you go up the ranks and you start to get involved in conversations that really move the dial on the next 5 years, next 10 years for institutions, it also potentially can change, right? People's job scopes, the way they do things. These are all incredible conversations, and it's not a binary like we do or we don't. There are a lot of trade-offs, a lot of considerations, right? Impact across organizations. So today, I think whether I'm fortunate or not, I get involved in more difficult decisions, really speaking with management and engaging in some of these trade-offs, the cost to adopt new technology, and right, what are the opportunities around there. So this really gives me a much different perspective, I would say, versus my earlier years, right? I think the second is probably more of an industry observation. So my industry observation is having been in a finance, or some say the old world, right? We call it TradFi or Web2, whichever, and progress with them, in the last 10 years. I think there's one thing that's for sure, is that the mindset has shifted, the culture has shifted, the talent mix has also shifted. So there is a lot more appetite in organizations this day to find out more about new disruptive technology and what it means for them, whether they are compelled or otherwise. But I think the mindset has shifted. So people are more willing to see and understand new technology and see if it really impacts their work, more willing to engage in conversations with technology service providers and see if there are opportunities for collaborations or adoption. So I think that it's also a big inflection shift for the industry as well. It's not just me. I think we all have grown together as an industry.
I would say that's from your perspective, and from the change is from your perspective, and also the change is also from the people around you seeing. And how about your experience? I mean, the technology that from the past 10 years, the previous 10 years to the current age, are there any difference, or are there any changes in the finance sector that would amaze you?
Yes, so I think maybe I share in the perspective of both finance and tech, and just give some cool example. In fact, let me just give a story. So in 2013, I was introduced to Bitcoin. Okay, and I was a young banking auditor, right? And I was looking at AML framework under the MAS regime in Singapore, looking through and make sure the bank's AML practices are up to scratch. And this is part of my work. So my trader friends introduced Bitcoin to me, and I told them, "Hey guys, it's a scam. There are tons of AML issues in the Bitcoin, right?" And that was 2013. Okay, I was a young little guy who just emerged out of university, got involved in AML and banks and stuff like that, right? Now, fast forward close to 8, 10 years later, Wei Jie becomes the digital assets lead. He becomes the person who drives the adoption of technology in the industry for capital markets institutions, right? Who we deal with these topics and use cases and the growth potential. So if you look at what happened, I was the one who says no to Bitcoin, and subsequently, I'm the one who say please adopt more of this technology. Such a dramatic shift in 8 years. And I met up with my trader friends again. They say, "Wei Jie, how can you do this to us, right? You asked us not to get involved, and now you're doing it yourself." So this is a classic example. I'm not the only one, obviously. This is a classic example that I think that a shift has happened in the industry. For example, back in the days, banks were not even open bank accounts for crypto guys, but this we're talking about relooking at their onboarding framework, due diligence framework, to make sure they are not missing out on new wealth, right? New millionaires that has made their money in crypto. Some of them, even up to these few days, JP Morgan is driving crypto loans, right? Or quantum secured crypto and stuff like that. It is now super mainstream. Banks are really opening up. That shift is a generational shift that is very good for everyone. There are the similar cases in cloud computing, in AI. Each of the technology shift, you see that people shift along and institutions shift along, sometimes even business models shift along, that organizations will have to move with times or they get left behind.
Yep. Wow. So I would say all of the changes that you saw that reflect well, I think it's resonated a lot to every of our listener and even to me as well. when we first hear about Bitcoin, we face it, we react to it in a very skeptical way. But now it's become literally a wave, and so many banks are having their own the thing called digital currency as well. It's literally not a hype, but it's people is working on transformation and advocating this because they yield a concrete benefit to the users and also to the organization from all. And we're going to dive deeper in this part later on. So now we are talking about digital currency and also digital assets. Digital asset is one of your core expertise that you've been navigate with both startups, major institutions to embrace all of these things. And for a company starting its digital asset journey, what the single most important first step that you're gonna tell them to start first?
Essentially, I think over the years in all my interactions, the singly most important, I think it's about the mindset to open and the mindset to learn. A lot of the initial years, it's not like digital assets just boom overnight and everybody wants to adopt it. It's a journey. I remember in the early years where there's a lot of education going on. We've got VCs, high net worth guys, we've got banks, and just coming here, what is this? How do we get something out of this, right? So the learning curiosity, right, is fundamentally important because when people are not aware of or are familiar with, and when there are unknowns and what this means for the organizations, right, the barrier to entry and the ability affects the ability to make a decision or to take risk, right? And that's because the risk is not understood. It's not informed, it's not calculated. So for many organizations, I think the starting point for digital assets, frankly speaking, it's a lot around just figuring out what is blockchain 101, right? Why are people so interested in it? What are your peers doing? And you can see the momentum gathers over the years. Now, obviously, there are some early adopters, some of the more brilliant and courageous ones, right? But by and large, and especially for big institutions, typically what they do is they set up a digital assets team, and this becomes the capabilities enabler for the entire organizations. So these are the guys who learn about the topic, learn about the technology, connect with the industry and the right players. Then they bring the entire organization on that journey, right? The organization doesn't even have the appetite to even start understanding what this is, right? And the people, the decision makers, for example, your department heads, right, your business unit heads, or even at the C-suite level, does not have the natural curiosity to understand what this means for them and the change will come in the landscape. Then I think you usually typically prolong and defer their adoption by months or years. So I think this is single-handedly the most important factor from my perspective. For startup, you probably even need it faster and pivot faster, right? Sometimes, especially when your runway is dwindling down, I think this becomes incredibly important that the curiosity and the flexibility all come into play, especially in the digital asset space where things move super fast. People have to really be curious and move with times.
I see. Thinking about telling people to adopt something. It's a hard thing, right? Especially for the C levels, and even for sometimes this technology is not relevant to a few position in the C level as well. So to have them really encouraged to learn and to try to understand these things. Do you have any maybe kind of tips or any suggestion here?
Yes, I think fundamentally, I recall some of the conversations, right, with more senior leadership, and we're used to have this humorous comments. Oh, this is for youngsters. Buy the monkey or something. It's just a youngster thing. By the time it become big, I will retire. But fundamentally, it's also about understanding the horizon of the industry, like how long it takes to mature, and what it means for you as an individual in your career, in the role that you play, and what it means for the company. It is also going out there and understanding that you don't really have to know every little technical bits. When it comes to the making of the decision and moving organizations or deciding whether to even take a first step forward, right? Sometimes it's really trying to wrap your heads around what's happening in a very simple manner. It's not that complex, right? It doesn't have to be all technical stuff, right? Sometimes it really can just put it in very, very plain vanilla terms on what this means for your distribution, for your products, how engage your customers, right? Things like that will start to then help them align and associate with their business. And then from there, they can adopt some of these learning opportunities and eventually implementation opportunities better. So I think the mindset is important. We should not be too scared. It's the same for AI. Everyone is so scared. They think they need to learn how to code and build models and agents and stuff like that. But it's not true. Sometimes it's just figuring out why and how it impacts, your people's work. And that is probably more decision making than really knowing how to code, which software to use.
Be open and curious and see how it would help me or on individual scale or on the organizational scale. But always stay evaluating whether this thing is good, is practical, is good for the business context. So then if it's good, let's start it working on learning deeper, working on implementation later on. But yeah, I see the mindset is really important, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think we are quite fortunate these days, right? If you look at 10 years ago or 15 years ago, right, you don't have the number of talks, podcasts, people helping each other in the industry, associations, forums, events. We don't have that. As we have that, but not so many, right? So really, your access to information, coordinating and cooperating, with your peers in the industry has been never easier in history, if I may. Right? In the past, every bank is hiding their under Banking Secrecy Act what they want to do, and I get it. It's still important to maintain your competitiveness, but the truth of the matter is, in terms of the advancement of the technology, right, and adoption, I think these days information just flow so much more efficiently across the landscape, and so it's not difficult to not just only understand the technology, but also what this means for others, what are other people's lessons. Do I have to adopt it? Do I go all in? Do I take measured steps? So this is widely available, and it's really not like a Mount Everest to surmount these days anymore.
I believe that you've been going through so many changes. You've been helping so many institutions working on these changes before. So what's some tangible changes that you see most clearly when this learning and this?
I think it depends for this question, right? Which level you go. You can see the individual level, the team level, the organization level, and on each department, right? So obviously the tech guys will be super happy when it's finally implemented. But what's more interesting is usually the business guys. When you first interact, I won't say all, but many will be very hesitant. Some of them is, are you adding more jobs to me? For some of them is, are you taking away my jobs? Right? So there is a lot of fear going on, or uncertainty, right? That is sitting amongst the mindset of the business guys, because you always don't know what you don't know. And then everything out there in the news is a whole new wave is coming, especially the AI ones. It's going to replace our jobs. All this really scary news out there, right? If you're sitting at the business side and you have no idea what this is, right? You'll be scared. Okay, so fundamentally, this is very common, especially when the disruptive tech starts to get a bit more mature. These mindsets come bigger and bigger. Unfortunately, the organizations usually already have a plan for this, so it's not a choice. And they will have implementation teams that come in, right, with a lot of plan, and step by step, some of the business units will be brought on that journey. Now, interestingly, is that when people understand and see the results for themselves, post the implementation of technology, I think we tend to have, not always, but we tend to have happier business guys over time. For example, if you do RPA on some of their work, instead of doing 100 spreadsheets combination, one click gets it done. Wow, you can see the joy in their face because they potentially can do more meaningful stuff from there. So why I share this is because there are journey on individuals level, depending on where you sit. The organization level, I think, especially at the higher level, there's the pressure to perform. Now, depending on your persona, it can be a listed firm, it can be a licensed firm, etc. The motivations and the stakeholders' pressure are different. Okay, but by and large, sitting in the executive board or management team, I think a lot of this pressure is here to stay, and it's even more challenging in the technology world. There's a lot more challenges in combining the motivations of running a company with that of implementing a technology. And if they do get it right, I think sometimes it's transformational for the organizations. It can change their valuation multiples, it can change their talent structure, right? But it's just not easy to get it right. Most organizations have a choice today. You either move or you get left behind, right? So I think it's just that journey that everybody has to go through.
So when we talk about digital asset and all of those digitalization, digital transformation things, compliance and governance as always comes along. And yeah, most of people is most of people are gonna telling that is the burden, but it's actually not, right? Because when is having them is the thing that help you can proceed things in a very sustainable way, and it's very essential. We cannot miss it whenever we're working on any step of deployment or etc. But still, so many people struggling with this. Can you share a time when regulation became a real blocker, and how did you help the client work through it?
So first, I think I wouldn't say trouble, but the mindset of the industry on compliance is like they are policemen, they are very expensive, right? And there are some merits to that. If you're a startup, you need to build a compliance team. Compliance team costs and compliance costs is anything between 16 to 20, 29, 30%, right? Of your cost structure. So compliance is a real cost burden on the back, on the P&L, the profit and loss. Right? Setting up a compliance team is quite expensive, right? Because these days, right, the staff command a high amount of salary. Right? So compliance as a burden, I think is legitimate consideration. Sometimes this narrative gets stretched too far. Like for example, certain jurisdiction, they will say, oh, compliance is here to stifle innovation and stop everything. The big brother doesn't allow us to adopt technology and become better. I think some of this does happen, right? And people on panel stage and out there is throwing regulated versus non-regulated, licensed versus non-licensed, especially the Web3 guys in the last 5 years. But I view it differently. And then after that, I'll get to the example. I view it differently. For me, I think obviously not is all institutions are perfect, including regulatory institutions, but they have a role to play. And the role to play is to protect the social goods and the welfare of the bigger society. There is more compliance costs, but if you think about it from an overall adoption standpoint, having compliance and regulations is what opens up the other 90% of the market that is not available today, because it gives confidence for people who don't understand this technology to utilize your products more. So if people are able to view it from that angle, then you realize it is a necessary cost to open up or gain access to a wider market, more opportunities. And it is truly unfolding today. If you look at the capital markets, stablecoin has been announced to be the next big thing in the US. Vietnam is opening up on crypto, etc. This allows the next 90% of the market to participate beyond just investing, right? So I think this is very important. And so coming back to then an example, and I think this kind of paints what potentially can be the right way going forward. I think there are times where the regulatory landscape has not caught up with the technology. For example, if it's AI, what kind of framework, governance framework would a bank be expected to have to make sure they can abide on the explainability of the AI? Digital assets, how do you handle the money laundering risk with what you expect, what the regulators expect out of you? If not, they'll suspend your license, right? But if the regulator have not understood the nuances and how it works, it's very hard to then change the current regulations to match the requirements of the new business model. So during this transitionary period, and if a business model wants to get a license, I think that's where the challenge is, because the regulator don't really understand, or the current regulatory framework is not fit for purpose. Okay, but I think one thing that was very helpful is early dialogue. Like we don't have to go out to the world and shout out that we're talking to the regulator, but you can approach the regulator. And in my experience, many of them in the Southeast Asia region are open to dialogues, to conversations, right? You can introduce to them what is the technology about, how I want to distribute my products, what's my commercial model, my business model, and have that dialogue them, walk them through the technology. In some jurisdiction, Singapore, Hong Kong, a few, there are sandboxes as well. Use those to have the dialogue with the regulator. Now, when that happens and they understand you better, there is a greater likelihood that you get licensed and you can reach out to the addressable market So in one of those, I was just part of that conversation, just trying to help them explain to regulators what this is about, what is the benefit of the technology to the ecosystem. I think dialogue, mutual understanding and respect between regulator and industry is fundamentally important, and people should have the guts as well as take the initiative to reach out to engage.
I believe this one is some of the tips, or not really a tips, but something that not many people going to tell you in real life for our audience here, and they would take this into account and do something around them. This is where we're going to zoom out more on what you're doing right now. Let's talk about the tech that you are working on and how quantum and AI, blockchain, these convergence are set to reshape financial services. So I think most of us have heard of quantum computers and quantum computing, right? And when we were in Singapore FinTech Festival last year, they also have quantum computing as a keynote in every speaker speech. So for quantum computers, they are, from what I know, they don't run on regular binary like zeros and one. They run something called qubits. And I've seen the documentaries on in IBM that quantum computer. They look like this is not like our regular computer, right? It's like an alien, a golden alien. So when I heard first hear about the technology you're working on, I'm thinking, are you working with these computers? Because they are very expensive and they can only function at a near zero temperature. So yeah, maybe let's take this time to clarify more on what you're working on and how exciting that is.
Yeah, absolutely. More, I would own a quantum computer, definitely not in my house. I'm from Curanium, and Curanium is trying to build a quantum secured AI-enabled blockchain, right? Like a brand new, just think of it as a brand new Bitcoin or Ethereum. What we have done is to take recognized post-quantum cryptography that's endorsed by NIST in the US and use that and encrypt and build a brand new blockchain that has not existed today, right? I think most of the blockchain today is based on the previous generation encryption, which is elliptic curve based, and that is susceptible to the threat of quantum computing as it continues to advance. And you are right, it's not binary. I think in the way that it's been programmed and designed, quantum computers can solve certain types of real world problems, especially those relating to randomization, far more effectively than today's computer. And therefore, the previous generation encryption, right, is ripe to be compromised by quantum computer at some stage. Not today, but at some stage, because the technology in the space continuously advances, right? So what we are doing is just preparing for that moment when it comes and start building the infrastructure of today. Now, in addition, you mentioned the word convergence. So we have also embedded AI into the blockchain just to make people's life faster and more seamless, right? So it can be helping you to code a lot faster, right? Using our kind of remix software, or it can be something that helps to do bug detection on the go as you are about to implement on the chain. So some of these tools, right, just really makes people's life easier as an AI element. We're not going to stop here. There's a few more, in a roadmap that we plan for. So eventually, I think we just try to imagine that this is an ecosystem, a blockchain ecosystem that is designed for the next 100 years, right, for the future, as opposed to what we have now. One thing I want to highlight is it's not like we go to each technology and adopt it like it's a sector. So well, today I'm only quantum, today I'm only AI, right? Today I'm only blockchain. It's not like that. What it works is we sit down and ask ourselves, what is the problem? And then with the problem statement, you ask yourself, what technology can solve this problem? Like what is out there? So it's important to understand that framework, because then this goes on to shift your mindset that you are not very bifurcated where, oh, I can only touch a blockchain, right? I only need to be a blockchain expert. Then we're focusing on the wrong things. We're just focusing to try to be a better chain, a faster chain, cheaper, faster, better. That's what they always say, right? But no, we have forgotten that solutions exist to make people's life better, to solve problems, right? The end user should be the center of all the technology solutions. So if you shift your mindset, then very naturally, sometimes you have 2 or 3 technologies coming together. And that's why I call it convergence, as you mentioned, right? To make people's life. So I think that's very important, and that's what we are trying to do at Turanium as well, right?
So you're working for the futures. I believe that maybe if one day we can have a chance to tap and you directly use your product at some point. And so when we're talking about the usage here, still, so when we're talking computing and quantum computer, those are pretty much a different thing, to be honest. But for many scientists, quantum computing is still not yet fully reached its practical and large scale use. So why is quantum is more than hype? And how does it truly impact financial system, the financial service industry?
Whenever I explain this question, I first want to help people understand that there's two broad categories. There is the opportunity side, where you use a quantum computer to generate business opportunities and solve problems. And there is the quantum security side, where you're defending against the threats brought about by quantum computers. The second bucket is more important than ever, that needs to be dealt with, right? When you deal with an emerging threat that's going to come, right, you got to start building your defenses, right? If you know somebody is going to attack you, you start building your defenses today. You don't wait until the attack before you start building. So the defense side of things, the security side of things, I think it's more important that the organizations get on board today, immediately. In fact, you're behind time to deal with this threat, because it takes time to come up with a response plan to deal with this threat. So there is this angle. Now, your question is probably leaning towards the first one, which is what I do with the quantum computers, and is it a hype, right? Now, the truth of the matter is the quantum computer that you saw and some of those is pretty big, right? There are smaller ones that's been made for use cases at room temperature that's already available in the market. But by and large, you're right. It's not commercially or practically savvy at this stage. Not everybody's going to buy one of those. And that's similar to back in the days, mainframe of IBM and the old classical computers, where it's very big, right? But however, look at the advancement of it, right? And we're talking about stacking of qubits, logical qubits, and different schools. There's a race out there on how many qubits they can get them together, right? That number is changing very fast every few months, okay, amongst the academia. IBM obviously have its own approach as well, parallel computing and stuff. So that is also moving very fast. They're all announcing this year is National Year of the Quantum by United Nations. Why is that so? It's because people start to recognize it's really impacting the various ecosystem, and the tech is starting to reach an inflection point. Whilst it's not there and there's only some simple use case, but it is really coming like it has never been before. And this hype and publicity will further accelerate even faster, because capital will come in, talents will start to learn on this topic and contribute, institutions will be jumping in use cases. So you can see the momentum coming and coming, right? So in all essence, whilst there's a hype, but hype exists in all tech cycle. You need the hype to bring a wave of resources into the industry, and it will crash and it will come back up, right? And it starts to normalize. So this is the hype that we're talking about. But for someone with a longer term horizon, then this is either opportunity or threat for you that you have to deal with. And you got to figure out what is your approach towards this. There are also security sites like quantum secured, right, coins that JP Morgan is working on, and there are other infrastructure like how banks transfer quantum secured in the market. They have some of these projects that's going on. So all in all, I think it's emerging, but it's heading in the right direction, and we will see a fair bit more of this even in the financial services market in the coming years.
We are talking about the quantum opportunity side on how it's gonna help financial service system. The thing that your team is working on is called quantum secure infrastructure. So that's the thing that help prevent out of the risk from the opportunities, right? So how about the quantum secure meanings to finance? How are you gonna help the financial firms to prevent out the risk if they apply these quantum technology, quantum computing to the system?
So you just think about it, right? What if one day I invent a key that can open any doors on this earth? That's gonna be so scary. What if I tell you, your Bitcoin tomorrow I can take it, right? Whatever coin you want, I can take it. That's quite scary. It's like a bank, it might not be there tomorrow. This is the same kind of mindset that's out there, right? So fundamentally, like, I don't want to make this all about financial services, even though it's very prevalent. It is about the security of the communications infrastructure. It is not just a blockchain thing. Any communications typically adopt encryption, and the encryption needs to remain robust against the threat of technology that's trying to compromise it, right? So any forms of communications, and communication super important between banks and customers and users, right? And even in a blockchain landscape, what we're trying to do here is to adopt a more robust or deem more robust, not technically proven encryption, right? That can respond right to this particular technology and the risk that it brings. And the specific communication channel that we're working on is on a blockchain network. That's what we're doing, right? So there's no 100% risk-free technology. We all know that, right? But what you can do is materially mitigate the threat posed by this technology, right? So adopting what we call PQC, post-quantum cryptography, on the blockchain network is our way of saying that you can transact on the blockchain more safely tomorrow. But obviously, for a bank or for a fund, not everything is on the blockchain. They still have their Swift network, they have other forms of communication. Everything needs to be secure. It's not just the blockchain. So that's something that I think the banks have to consider, right? And I'm sure, and pretty sure that's something that they are working on to make sure the entire technology ecosystem, right, and their digital assets inventory is quantum secure.
Okay, I see. Right. So now we've been walking through how the opportunities and also the threat that quantum computing gonna poses on different industry and especially in financial service industry and the way your quantum secure infrastructure gonna help them. But you said that the product your team are building is gonna add a layer of AI and blockchain in there. So how would these three powerful technology gonna is the advent of AI and blockchain is gonna help in what way more than just quantum can solely do?
Between AI and quantum and blockchain and AI in many capacities out there, right? And by and large, fundamentally, we are a blockchain. Fundamentally, and quantum secure just makes it more secure. The AI just improve the performance and the experience of both the developer and users, and sometimes even us as a team behind the projects. So there's many shoes that can be played. However, to make it more meaningful, essentially, some of the confluence of technology is obviously happening, right? So I give you an example. Say AI and blockchain. There are already many AI agents type of applications that's using blockchain to govern its commercialization angle, distribution angle, and even data governance, right? On the provenance and who you pay to train the various LLMs and the agents that uses it, right? So there's some of this that's in play, right? And where the AI community can latch on the blockchain to create a commercial model. That's an example. Now, conversely, AI can come in. For example, a quantum secure blockchain will have higher latency. There's higher data required that's transmitted over the network, so it's slower, right? Now, an AI, you can come in and, for example, look at the performance of the chain by timing and reallocate resources, right? Just so that the network becomes more efficient. So, that's not something you want a human sit down and do it. You probably want an AI that's ongoing monitoring, ongoing rechanneling the resources to make sure the performance of the blockchain is enhanced. Even for things like where we're building, for example, a new LLM, right, that works for the whole of Southeast Asia, that's been built in the background. Vietnam, Singapore, everyone's working together. So next time, right, someone who speaks Vietnamese, another country who speaks Bahasa Indonesia, and everyone will understand each other, and they can facilitate, right, the provision of products and services on technology infrastructure. So that's super cool when you think about it, right? We don't need later anymore. A lot of this can be naturalized very fast on various infrastructure and network. So a lot of this confluence will happen. Quantum, right, will also have its own way of making things work, right? Solving problems that have never been solved before, potential change, right? And potentially with AI. And AI can also speed up the quantum computing performance. Quantum computing is actually very slow. It needs to quicken, right? It's just solving the problem differently. That's all, right? So these are some of the confluence, right, that we look at, and then they will transcend to individual use cases for different sectors and different industries.
All of these conversion together can create some maybe really powerful thing. But I would say, since you working on something that is ready for the future, when you talk to leadership about all of these technology all together, maybe 30% of the client are startup and they just on their way to build an MVP, and they still, even though they have a stable budget to build it, but they still need more investment, And when we're talking, you're also a startup advocate here as well. Just curious about how you're gonna talk about the technology that haven't been really adopted wide range, like the technology that you're working on, and share this with all of the leadership and the people around in your ecosystem that can help you to bring this technology up at some point.
Yeah, so in a lot of my conversations, maybe the first one we talk about the technology in a little bit more depth, right? But by and large, the convincing or the influence, it's rarely about the technology. That's the honest truth. It's about understanding our counterpart, what stage they are at, what is it that they are doing, what is it that we're doing, and would a collaboration, would an adoption actually help the company out, right? So I give an example. Say a company in the real estate startup space, right? And in 2017, 18, if they all of a sudden do tokenized real estate, their valuation multiples will jump multiple folds just because they touch on blockchain. So sometimes it's not even knowing what blockchain is. It's the fact that depending on the stage and your need of a startup, for example, you are in the funding stage, right? This can be a strategy that you adopt to help drive up your valuations, and then that gives you more capital. A lot of this may not necessarily be about the technology. It can be how it helps your company. It can be you're not doing well and you need a new business unit, or you need something for your shareholders, or it can be really transformative as well. Like, okay, the logistic landscape will be disrupted, right? Or the driving landscape, the taxi landscape will be disrupted by Uber and Grab. It can be. There are many ways. You have to figure out what is your company about, what are they doing at what stage, and how can you best use what comes with this technology for your company. Then you decide whether you need to adopt, collaborate, or otherwise. You don't always need to spend a lot of money. You can collaborate, you can do JVs, you can come up with different products and ask other people who have the capability to come together. So I think we can think out of the box. I don't want to walk around saying, hey, quantum super awesome, AI is super awesome, right? It's gonna, change the world. You just sit on your couch and you make money. No, it's not like that. I think it depends on what's the profile of your company. And then you cleverly decide what you want to do with this opportunity and this tech phase.
I see. Very valuable. You've been walk us through so many parts of the fintech space, the digital asset, AI, blockchain, quantum as well. Now we should looking forward a bit. How should emerging leaders prepare for a future shaped by all these emerging technology? As a story that you share previously, when we're talking about blockchain and decentralization, etc., we think it's a scam, but moving forward, they're becoming so many firms adopting it, and AI as well. We're still being skeptical currently, and upcoming there's still more technology that we haven't seen yet. So how would these people, the emerging leaders, should be prepared for the all of the emerging tech keep coming up? Are there any concrete skill set that you want them to start working on?
There are jobs like AI prompt does not exist in the past. We have new jobs being created. You must be nimble to be prepared to welcome the new jobs, the new professions that will enable your company, right, to capitalize on these opportunities. So you're absolutely right. The mindset was going to talk about. But if we want to be more specific, I also think that the collaborative mindset is also equally important. If we look at the pace at which the ecosystem is evolving, it's very, very hard and not cost efficient and time efficient for you to build everything on your own. And given the degree of plug and play and connectivity available, I think it's a lot faster to work together with partners, right, and shorten your go-to-market. So I think that's one key element. The second one is look at the evolving technologies, right? I think eventually many of them, they started with hundreds, thousands of startups doing the same thing. Then some will not survive, and then at some point they'll consolidate. And after they consolidate, you will see few big guys, right, oligopolies, and they will start forming consortiums within the ecosystem that maps out the life cycle of an end user, right? More and more of these partnerships and congregation and collaboration happen. I think navigating the new world, that probably is a smarter way to move forward, to find friends, to work together, right, to build faster, and also to help survey the ecosystem together. Second, right? I think be prepared for the talent structure shift. It's not impossible that you now need more coders, tech guys than you have amongst your workforce than in the past. Today, pretty much every company have a CTO. You see, that's another job that's been created, right? So I wouldn't even be surprised if one day we might have a chief AI officer or something else that might come along. You never know. But my whole point is your talent structure has to shift to meet these new opportunities and new risk, right? So I think that's also very important to look at. And then finally, I think the truth of the matter is that we are the whole ecosystem will always be chasing hype, right? This is the big thing. That's the next all-time high Bitcoin price. This is the next IPO story. It's always hype. It's always hype, right? But the ability to cut through and figure out what's fundamental for your business and figure out the timing of adoption or not to adopt both ways, I think is very important because you help companies go less in circles and get to the end game faster, right? So timing is important, and this obviously comes from learning and being aware of what's going on in the industry.
I see. Yep. Leaders, listeners, please note we have a lot of insights been given by Wave here, and he's definitely riding the wave to give us all of these insight from across his journey. One more thing. What is the thing makes you most excited right now when we're talking about how it's going to change financial service? Not just that, but maybe the technology that you're most excited about?
Sure. I think personally, out of all the technologies, I'm still very bullish on blockchain and the way that it's being utilized in the ecosystem in the next 10 years. So obviously, every technology has its own maturity curve, right? And if we look at blockchain, we have had a lot of fun issuing different types of crypto, NFTs, etc. So the truth of the matter is that the real institutional money hasn't really come. People do not use it every day. You and I, we don't use it every single payment transfer. We don't use it to get loans. We don't use it. However, what I see is that we are right now in that particular transitional shift where blockchain can finally be more mainstream like it can never be before. Previously, it was all innovation tech and a few Web3 players. Today, it's becoming a lot more mainstream and open. And what that means is we're going to see unparalleled access to products and services that's cross-border, right? Regardless which country you're in, you have way easier access to certain products that you never have before. Now, blockchain is going to reshape that a fair bit, and it's opening up, right? Vietnam is opening up for crypto adoption, which it previously doesn't, right? US is opening up. You think about it, the next 10 years, what I was looking for, the next 90%, is finally starting to come. And that's about timing. Very exciting because we're talking about trillions of dollars and participation opportunities for everyone. So I love AI, I love quantum, but if you talk about timing, I think blockchain, even though it started early, is finally here, and people would be foolish to ignore the power of this and what it can bring to a lot of organizations, right, in the next 10 years.
Great, thank you. Maybe if any of our speaker planning to investing in a certain industry, maybe could take this into account. Thank you so much for such rich, strong, clarity information that you give into us. And it's rare to meet someone who's been inside legacy finance and now building the future of it. Any final messages before we end the show?
It's not rare. There's going to be a whole army of us, people who
Okay.
does finance and tech, and there's a lot of very smart youngsters coming up doing a lot of this. So there's a whole group of people. For me, I think it's just preaching, right? Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Yeah.
It's very cliche, but it really works in this space. And sometimes you don't know, if there is a golden treasure chest waiting for you at the end of the rainbow, right? So specifically for the Southeast Asia crowd, I am super bullish. We've got untapped talents, in Vietnam for sure, 100%, right? In Philippines, Indonesia, in Malaysia. You just think about it, like the degree of opportunities available for all of us here. It's massive. If anything, this should be the economy we want to create in the next 20 years. It can be creators economy, it can be blockchain economy. whichever, right? Like I think everybody has a phone these days. We do not have to be restricted by the previous institutions and politics has been set. I think there's a lot more room for everyone to explore, to try new things, right? To work on things that you don't know if it's going to get there, but it's meaningful, and to collaborate. And sometimes I think it's going to pay really well and reward everyone really well.
Okay, guys, this is Control Shifter with Wave, riding the wave. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode.